Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and in the wake of the Monaco Grand Prix, another difficult weekend of course for Mercedes, but they're complaining very much indeed about the state of the Monaco Grand Prix in terms of the circuit layout. The fact that Alonso was able to do what he did during the race certainly is making some people think, should this track even return this year, and if it does, are layout changes necessary to make this track actually work for modern Formula 1? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Lots to dive in today. This is Perez's dad celebrating the victory in beautiful fashion, and this I thought was kind of funny actually, looking at the start of the weekend releasing qualifying compared to the Sunday, when it turns out this pretty much in order was actually the podium at the end of the day. Kind of remarkable. Now of course, speaking of Charles Leclerc, didn't make the podium of course, was the big talking point was not just the strategy, and I'm kind of surprised we didn't get to see or really hear about any of this stuff while the race was going on, but really while that whole thing was going down where Leclerc was pitting for Inters and then he was pitting for the actual slicks just a few laps later, he was actually held up by Alex Albon, and also Sainz was held up by Nicholas Latifi, so both Williams getting in the way of the Ferraris. Now look, Ferrari at the end of the day can really only blame themselves. I think they have been somewhat hard done by this weekend, at least they feel like they have, but they made the suboptimal strategic calls that they did, and Red Bull seemed to be so good under pressure in those situations, and also putting their drivers out in clean air so they don't have to worry about back markers getting in the way, because even if Alex Albon had got out of the way, at apparently the 16 blue flags he received and did not pull over for Leclerc, he'll explain it to you in a second from his POV, but I'm not really sure he's the one who gets to decide whether he pulls over or not. That's kind of what blue flags are for, but even if he did pull over, Leclerc might have still lost a bit of time, but yeah, both Sainz and Leclerc probably lost positions, honestly, based on getting held up by a couple of Williams. So maybe Alex Albon is still kind of Red Bull's secret agent here, but this is some of the footage actually of basically Leclerc comes out behind Albon here, and he's getting all sorts of blue flags, comes through, into effectively the hairpin here in a second, and I think he sees his first blue flag here on the right hand side, it comes up on the board, and then he rounds this corner, sees another blue flag on his left here, blue flags all over the shop, and Leclerc's right behind him, right on his gearbox, basically saying, look, can I please get past more blue flags from this marshal as well on the left hand side here, doesn't pull over, only gets past because he locked up, I believe, going into one of the corners, and now he explains this in a really strange way actually. Like, I think if this was Latifi, he might be getting a lot more flack than this, or if it was Mazepin or something, just because Albon's kind of well liked, I'm not really sure people are talking about it too much, but as he apparently describes, we were on the slicks and had a massive pace advantage. Not sure that actually is translated into reality. I'm pretty sure Leclerc was faster than Albon around these laps, at least based on looking at the footage, so not really sure this is true, and in fairness, maybe he was a massive pace advantage for like 250 meters out of the pits, but after that Leclerc was the faster car again. It would take 3 corners to let him past, and then I would have been able to been straight away quick enough to overtake him again. I felt it was quicker for both of us if I just stayed ahead, but Albon isn't the one who gets to decide that. If the blue flags are there, you have to let him pass. That's the rules. Now, for some reason, there was no penalty about this, right? We've seen in previous seasons drivers getting penalties for failing to respect blue flags, and Alex Albon did this for pretty much an entire lap here, and effectively received no penalties at all. So I'm not really sure what the race directorship was doing. Also, the fact that the Ocon Hamilton thing got figured out an hour after the actual incident occurred. Kind of crazy, the race directorship, and also the viewing experience, the broadcasting, is we didn't really get to see or talk about any of this stuff during the race itself. We're going to talk about Mercedes though, as I thought a beautiful shot actually of when it was raining early on. This is Hamilton of course here with the yellow T-bar when the wet tyres are on. This is kind of shortly after the start of the race of course. Now Alonso eventually ends up ahead of Hamilton as he was on the start, and there was some talk about, given the fact that Ocon's penalty was coming through, why Alonso is backing up the field so much, because eventually it meant that Ocon, that 5-second penalty, would drop him back a few places, and therefore he lost out on points. Apparently Alpine only told him towards the end of the race, at which point that was when Alonso kind of pushed on. Up until then he'd kind of been on a massive tyre saving mission, and honestly he was going so slowly that it looked like he was making a point, about how difficult it is around Monaco to overtake, and Hamilton tried it for a few laps and then realised, look, it's Monaco, Alonso's never going to let me through whatever I do, I might as well just give up here and keep Ocon behind me to frustrate him and make sure he doesn't get in the points, after arguably Ocon screwed Hamilton's race early on, because if Hamilton got through in that incident where Ocon basically pushed him into the wall and got the 5-second penalty for it, then Hamilton would have been away and gone in some clean air, might have been able to close the gap and see what could have happened from there. Hamilton was frustrated of course, but look, at the end of the day he knows what it is. After qualifying 8th in quali, he would probably expect to finish around there in the race. Obviously he was kind of hoping that the rain might throw a spanner in the works, but it didn't really change all that much for the teams behind the top 4 drivers on the weekend. But this kind of was just the graph right here of looking at how things were going. Perez, Sainz, of course, Verstappen at Leclerc, and then Russell and Norris behind them on track. And this is the gap that Alonso created to the fields. This just shows what Monaco is in these current Formula 1 cars, that Alonso is gapping 3 to 5 seconds a lap slower than the leaders, and he didn't have to be, right? He could have been pretty much there on the pace, but he was doing a very hardcore tyre saving mission, and also just probably going to show to a degree why Monaco doesn't really work work in the modern day. Right? Back in the day when the cars were tiny, you could certainly do it, but nowadays the cars are so wide, there's pretty much no overtaking opportunities at all. The only ones we ever really saw were in the wet, where Gasly made a couple of moves here just because he had more grip on those inters compared to some other drivers on the wets, and Hamilton tried to make a move down the inside here of turn 1, but outside of that, there really isn't any opportunities, no DRS through the tunnel, gives you really no chance down into the chicane. It's like, I mean, look at this, right? Alonso backed up the entire field, and Hamilton's just sitting there thinking, okay, what can we do? Now, of course, Wolf and well, the Mercedes guys have made their thoughts be clear on this. It was usual chaotic Monaco race, but again, a lesson has to be learned from the layout, so the guys can't drive 5 seconds off the pace in a motorcade. It's a fantastic venue, but it would be great if the races could be of the same standard, and that is the thing, honestly. Like, if they change the layout, if they could, use some other streets on, kind of in Monte Carlo, slightly behind where the current track is, it might make the racing better, marginally so, but it also kind of loses what is Monaco. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you change the track, then are you losing Monaco in its essence? And there was also rumours that even without changing the track, Monaco might be off the calendar anyway. But, this is what Toto Wolff goes on to say in another interview. If a car can slow down by almost 5 seconds, talking about Alonso, and hold everybody up, it is a shame for the racing here. So maybe we can look at the track layout and things that we can do, so we're not having a procession or having a strategy game or a qualifying race. You can see there's another lesson in that track position is everything in Monaco. 5 seconds difference is like a Formula 2 car, right? Saying that Alonso is driving like he was in a Formula 2 car. Just almost taking the mick, really, backing up everyone behind him. And there's nothing they could do. Like, Hamilton tried a few passing attempts, but Alonso just put his car in the right place, and it doesn't matter how slow I'm going, there's just no way you can get past, right? And it's, frustrating for Hamilton, I'm sure, and for the drivers behind him. But like, he does kind of clarify, look, it's a fantastic venue, fantastic spectacle, amazing to be here, but we need to have a look at the layout, right? So we can close, to make sure you can't just close the loop 5 seconds slower and you can still not get past. Hamilton's like, what's the point in letting this eat me away? I knew how it was going to be. Just unfortunate situation for him, of course, but I get Alonso just goes to show, and I think he also said, basically, not my problem to the other drivers that were stuck behind him, and it was extremely easy. He was asked how easy was it to keep Hamilton behind. He said, yeah, it was extremely easy. I felt no threat from him at all, effectively, which, given he was pushing him, he was within 0.3 of a second at one point or another before Alonso decided to actually put his foot down and move away towards the end of the race a little bit, and Hamilton probably knew that even if he was trying to keep up, he was never getting past anyway, and it was probably better for Hamilton, just out of, spite for Ocon, to try and make sure to back Ocon up as much as he possibly could, to try and get Ocon outside of the top 10, which I suppose Hamilton eventually achieved, if that was at all his aim. But basically just going to show from many different angles that this track does not really cut it with these modern Formula 1 cars. Yesterday's race, in fairness, was probably more entertaining than the vast majority of Monaco Grand Prix, but not necessarily due to the track layout, but due to conditions. If this was a regular race here with a one stopper, probably there was absolutely nothing going on at all, which would have been tough. So despite this being a pretty good Monaco Grand Prix, it certainly wasn't a good Formula 1 Grand Prix, in my opinion. You guys might disagree though, but there was even talk before the race began that F1 are not particularly happy. I believe Monaco's kind of license, or their kind of contract effectively, is up for the Grand Prix next year, and arguably Formula 1 needs Monaco less than Monaco needs Formula 1, if you know what I'm saying. So and apparently F1 isn't happy with some things, the fact that they have their deal with Rolex, and there's Tag Heuer all over, because effectively, Monaco does their own thing, they do their own production, they do their own advertisements and stuff, which doesn't really sit particularly well with F1, so they're kind of getting frustrated with it. And I wonder if F1 think, look, do we really need Monaco? It's a legendary track, but it's not really cutting it today. The drivers the drivers like it, they say they want it to stay, but the reality is, and yes, qualifying is good on a Saturday, but the reality is that you get races like this, and you get frustrations like this, where drivers can just not at all attempt to race, and still no one can get past them at all. So I do wonder what we'll see next season, whether we'll see a change to the layout, or whether it's possible that Monaco disappears entirely, because Charles Leclerc this year was obviously tipped, and it seemed relatively likely to take home the race victory this weekend at his home Grand Prix. He might never get a chance to do that again if Monaco disappears from the calendar, right? So very interesting stuff. Wanted to mention this just real quick as well, because of course Toto Wolff was also mentioning the fact that George Russell and Hamilton, I believe, he kind of said it maybe later on in this article somewhat, that effectively, they're on the same page right now. Yes, Hamilton's got kind of unlucky with, the red flag situation in qualifying, didn't allow him to go for a faster lap on the fresher set of tyres in, of course, the end of Q3. The Russell got a faster run in, he ends up P8, got somewhat unlucky with how things transpired this weekend as well, with the Ocon incident, getting stuck behind Alonso. He reckons that the drivers are pretty much on the same pace at the moment. The kind of tide will turn on the luck of the season, and there's plenty of races left, of course, for Hamilton to turn things around, but every race that goes past, the small hope he might have in the back of his mind somewhere that Mercedes is all of a sudden going to become a championship winning, or race winning car, and he might be able to pull something back, is probably slipping away a little bit. Now, as Mercedes kind of say on the same front, right, really right now, they're if you look at it optimistically, they're 5 tenths behind the top guys. If you look at it pessimistically, they're 8 tenths behind the top guys. So it definitely seems to depend on the track, especially in qualifying. It doesn't seem like a car quite yet that on any track, even Monaco, it hasn't favoured them for many years at this point. But really. But even if it was, a good enough car to win races, it doesn't seem to be good enough to stick it on pole. So a lot of races, that's certainly going to, hurt them, you'd imagine, more than it's going to help them. But in terms of a race car, it has been pretty good so far this season. They've obviously got a lot of work to do, though, to get to the point where they can actually compete for race wins over the coming weekends. But, a track like Azerbaijan might suit them a little bit more. Of course, that's the next race. Wanted to mention this real quick on Red Bull, actually, just because it was made clear by Max Verstappen here, and also Christian Horner from the Red Bull side, that effectively both drivers are still in the championship race. Perez is actually not far behind at all to Max Verstappen, about 15 or so points in it, and I'm sure that, of course, Perez is going to go all out as much as he possibly can. He hasn't settled for number 2 driver status or anything. He wants to win the World Championship, right? And he believes he can do it this year, and if anything, he's probably been, at least compared to last year's cars, more comfortable in this year's car than Max Verstappen has been, especially in qualifying, you could argue, because Verstappen would almost pretty much body him every single qualifying session last year. This time already, Perez has, shown a different gear in qualifying to what he's done before. So, still think Verstappen's the favourite for the championship, and I feel like out of the two teammates, there's maybe an 80, 20, 90, 10% chance that it's Verstappen that finishes above Perez. But there's always a chance, and I do wonder what that would mean from the Red Bull perspective. If all of a sudden Perez is very close to Verstappen, are they going to kind of stick with their number 1 kind of driver idea, or would that potentially go out the window depending on how things are going? If they're in comfortable control of the Constructors' Championship, let's say, that they might be if Ferrari continue to kind of make mistakes as they have been. This just to mention real quick actually from Vettel, because he had some thoughts on the full wet tyres. The fact that these wet tyres, because it's kind of frustrating to see when the race begins under the safety car or whatever, and it's still kind of wet out there, but then on the very first lap you get a guy like Gasly coming in and pitting immediately for the intermediates and going much quicker, pretty much straight off the bat. And Vettel believes that's basically because the wet tyre is just a bad tyre. Apparently it's way too hard, the grip isn't what it should be, and he basically says the full wets are effectively useless. You're just better off going onto the intermediate straight away because it's a softer compound and you can actually get grip on it, right? It's just a better tyre. So he reckons that was causing a lot of frustration for him and some other drivers this weekend, especially with how the race started. And he says back in the day, Monza 2008, China 2009, you used to be able to drive around in such conditions, but these wet tyres nowadays just don't give you enough grip to actually be able to do that. So he reckons those tyres are just absolutely terrible. And just an interesting stat to close out the video, the last 3 Monaco races that have been in the wets, 2008, 2016 and 2022, they've all been won from the driver who started the race in P3. Hamilton in both 2008, of course in the McLaren, and then in the Mercedes in 2016, and then most recently Perez started P3 and won the entire thing. So I wonder if that's a trend that might continue over the coming years as well. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.